Welcome to chat night, we bring you good vibe, we shine on the light. Welcome to chat night, we bring you good vibe, we shine on the light. We all over the world, chat night Africa. We all over the world, chat night Africa. Welcome to chat night, we bring you good vibe, we shine on the light. Welcome to chat night, we bring you good vibe, we shine on the light. We all over the world, chat night Africa. Chat night Africa. We all over the world, chat night Africa. Chat night Africa. Welcome to chat night, the only place that we give you good vibes. Chat night Africa. Welcome to chat night, all over the world we are shining the light. Chat night Africa. Welcome to chat night.
Hello everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Voices of Africa on Chat Night. My name is Divine Nchamukong. Those who have seen her in action in courtrooms describe her as the Pope, the Colossus of U.S. immigration law. Daniel Oswald Beach has over 30 years representing immigrants from over 90 countries in U.S. immigration courts. You see, when you are legally residing in the United States, you don't know what it is to be undocumented, the euphemism for illegal residency. Thousands of immigrants in inflatable boats brave the high seas. Some walk hundreds of miles through South American jungles infested with lions, tigers, and crocodiles, only to lose in immigration court. So, what happens? Poor lawyering or unconvincing storylines? If you have your legal papers authorizing you to live and work in the United States, what could cause you to lose your legal status? Now you begin to see where we are going with this. It's going to be a vivacious broadcast. You can expect it. Ladies and gentlemen, join me now in welcoming the top-notch, highly experienced lawyer in Washington, D.C., Mrs. Daniel Oswald Beach, to the platform. Danielle, thank you for coming to Chat Night Africa for the second time.
Thank you, Divine.
I have talked to a lot of Africans and they score you very highly. They tell me you are a firebrand, a firecracker in a courtroom. I have to believe that because the last time you showed up on Chat Night Africa, people couldn't stop talking about it. Now let's get into it. Danielle, the United States is the most sought after asylum destination in the world. What qualifies anyone for asylum in the United States?
So that's a very interesting question. We're in a situation just this month where asylum and migration in particular is a hot topic. And I mean, not just in the US, but the United European Union Commission, just this month was able to organize a pact that they are now going to have all the fellow states, and that's located in Brussels, as you know, to determine how best to handle migration. In other words, some countries are getting stacks of people that can't afford it and can't lodge them, and other people are not taking their share. So they're coming up with some rules. So the question is, what is asylum? Is asylum different things to different people, right? So asylum, if you talk to a Republican or a Democrat, is very different thing. What is it generally that is the problem with asylum? Why is it so controversial? And the reason it's so controversial is three reasons. One is it's seen as a threat by some people. Some people say, oh, these people are going to come take our jobs away. The answer to that is no. Actually, small businesses, the majority of small successful businesses are owned by immigrants and are very successful. Second reason is they say, oh, immigration's a challenge. We can't come up with solutions. Every law we pass, it doesn't work. And the third thing is, and this is why the European Union Commission has decided to take this on, is that they say migration is a fact. It's going to happen. It's going to keep happening. So let's deal with it. Let's figure out how to deal with it. So migration is supposed to be about persecution. Are you persecuted in your home country, or would you be persecuted if you went back home? That seems to be, unfortunately, an area that most people that come and apply for asylum don't really understand, because there are two things that will sort of disqualify you from asylum. And I see people falling in this trap all the time. One is, are you coming here for economic reasons? So, for example, there was a flood in your country, there was turmoil, there was war. For example, in Cameroon, there's civil war. Are you coming because of that? Because you can't find a job, because you can't work, because you can't go to school, because you lost your job, because if there's huge unemployment. That's not a reason for asylum, okay? Second reason is economic. So the two reasons are economic and turmoil. So those are not asylum. TPS is turmoil. That is what TPS is for. That's not asylum. And that's where I think the basic understanding of asylum is missed, because asylum is for people who would either were harmed back home or would be harmed if they went back.
So
hopefully
why isn't war one of them? Well,
war isn't one of them because it is turmoil in your country. And turmoil in your country, people have always come for that reason, right? That's the main reason that people come. They can't survive. They go on boats. Like you said, they drown. They go through jungles. They just need to get out. They can't find a job, whatever that is. So the economic and the turmoil are kind of connected. There's an interconnection between the two. So turmoil in immigration terms is defined as temporary protected status that's given to you by the State Department, who issues, and back in 2023, I think it was in April, they came up with TPS. TPS is temporary protected status. So it says, Nicaragua had it. I mean, El Salvador had it. I mean, lots of countries have had it. Sudan, Ethiopia now has it. So it's a country where there's so much problems that they're saying you can stay here and we'll give you a work permit, but we're not going to let you live here. Bring your family here, get a green card here, get a naturalized here. We're going to give you a temporary protection till your regime changes or your situation in your country changes, or the flood's gone, whatever it is the situation until that's gone.
Danielle, you have represented people from over 90 countries in the world. Now, this show is watched largely by Africans. What typically brings Africans to the United States seeking for asylum, from your experience?
So I think
any African country you want.
Okay. I think it's different for different African countries. It's also different in different years. So at one point I started my practice and I had a lot of professors fleeing Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. Then I had a lot of Ivorians who were working for the embassy who couldn't go back because of all the turmoil and change in governments there. Then you always have CAR, Central African Republic. But for Cameroon, it seems to be a place where mostly highly educated people who can't maintain their jobs because they're Anglophones. And specifically in Cameroon, if we're to be realistic, the real reason for TPS and temporary protected status was because of the Anglophones and good lobbying. But it was because the Northwest and Southwest provinces were particularly targeted by the CPDM and by specifically the BIA regime. It wasn't all of the Francophone area necessarily who was harmed, though any opposition is harmed in Cameroon. So if you oppose the government, that's principally the reason. What I've seen in recent years, and that goes to your question about that, is that people are coming here since COVID with very little thought as to what asylum really is. So what they're saying is, you know, I'm fleeing because the Amber Boys have invaded my village, my town. I'm fleeing because I can't, you know, there's guns, fights. It's not a safe place. And, you know, the government thought I was maybe an Amber Boy. So that's called imputed political opinion. That is not a particularly good claim. So going back to your question is, why do people lose? Poor story in the first place, number one. Number two, maybe the lawyer who didn't connect all the dots. But I think people are very quick to say it's the lawyer's fault. Maybe when you came across the border, and Africans never came across the border, by the way. It's only recently in the last few years. Before that, they always came with a visa. Then it was always the Central Americans who came across the border from Mexico. Now, again, it's a lot of Africans coming across the border. What does that mean? It means they don't have a visa. What else does that mean? If they never had a visa to come into the US, that means it limits their other options besides asylum, such as, say, they marry an American, which many do. They can't get a green card in the United States because they're inadmissible. So that's a problem.
Daniel, you are very familiar with the turmoil, political turmoils around Africa. You can talk about the one in Cameroon more than a lot of Cameroonians. You know what is happening in Nigeria, in the Delta region. You know what is happening in Ethiopia. If somebody comes to court and tells the judge that, look, Judge, I was being chased around by insurgent fighters, by armed fighters in Anglophone Cameroon, why isn't that a reason for asylum?
Because asylum is based on 5 different grounds. It can be based on religion, ethnicity, nationality, political opinion, and a particular social group. And a particular social group is defined as female genital mutilation, LGBT people. You do have a huge LGBT problem because you have this law 347 in Cameroon. You don't have a big FGM problem in Cameroon. It's not done nationwide. You don't have a huge forced marriage issue. For example, Guinea, Mali, Sierra Leone, they have a much stronger, even Nigeria, much stronger claim to female genital mutilation than asylum. So you have to kind of realize certain things work better depending on the country conditions of that country. So for example, Nigeria used to have huge problems with religion. Cameroon has never really had a huge problem with religions, except in the early 90s, maybe with if you were a Jehovah's Witness or an evangelical. So things change with different time periods. So, you know, what might have been a good claim 10 years ago might not be a terrible claim today. What might be a great claim for Mali might be a terrible claim for Cameroon. So number one, I think you want to go to a lawyer who kind of understands what's going on in your country or is able to research and figure it out. Number two, you know, you want to have a lawyer who really knows asylum, because a person, and this is a huge problem that we see a huge amount of, and I never used to see this, is people coming over and saying, it's the Amber Boys. It's their fault. I had to flee because the government thought I was a terrorist. Okay, you just handed over a whole lot of ammunition to the government when you say that, because they're going to say, oh, they thought you were a terrorist. Why did they think you were a terrorist?
So to what extent is the judge using his discretion or the law? Are these discretionary decisions or they are legally driven decisions that judges do take in immigration courts?
So every judge is different. That's another point. So the question is, does your attorney understand and know your judge? Some judges grant 2%. Some judges I've had grant 60%. That's pretty high. Now, lately, it seems as though those numbers have gone down and more people are being denied. And I'm not sure if it's because people have worse claims, their stories aren't very good, or if it's just because they've got a whole bunch of new judges. So, for example, in Arlington area, we used to have 2 courts, 12 judges, Baltimore and Arlington. Now we have 5 courts, and each court has about 30 judges. So, except Baltimore, that has probably 6 or 8. So when you have all these new judges, many are from backgrounds, prosecutor backgrounds or government backgrounds, they or have worked on appeals. So they have a very different view based on their own opinions, and that's their discretion, of what the law really means. So the law says 10%. Cordoza-Fonseca says 10% possibility of persecution. Credible fear interviews, reasonable possibility. But I've seen cases interpreted, during the Trump era where a reasonable possibility was not a reasonable possibility at all. It was like, no, you made one mistake. We're not going to give you a credible fear. So it's very different with the political climate. It's very different per judge. It's very different how that judge, if the judge respects the attorney and knows the attorney, that goes a long way too. So if your judge knows, okay, this attorney never does their job. They always, are kind of sloppy, that's going to go against you.
We love Night Africa.
And my name is Divine Chamukong. I'm anchoring this broadcast from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Granted that somebody ran away from war in any African country and came to the immigration court and is denied, what's the outcome? Temporary protected status, TPS, or what? What next? Deportation? Appeal?
So technically, if you're ordered removed by a judge, you have been deported, but you haven't actually physically been deported, but you've been ordered deported. So there's a difference. So the question is whether or not
you are granted temporary protected status if
temporary protected
you lose the case, or you can appeal it.
So temporary protected status is something I've kind of changed my opinion over time, because if you're in removal proceedings, I think there's a very good reason to file for TPS, because it gives you a work permit till 2025, and it'll probably be renewed again for another 18 months. So it gives you legal status, number one. It gives you inability to be deported. So if the judge ordered you deported and you don't appeal and you don't have anything, ICE can pick you up. If you have TPS, ICE cannot pick you up. They cannot deport you. So TPS is a protection, but TPS is also a temporary measure, and we don't know how long that will last. So I think logically the thing is, and I do a lot of appeals. I do a lot of appeals at the Board of Immigration Appeals. I do a lot of appeals in circuits. This year, I think I was twice in Louisiana and New Orleans, arguing in front of the Fifth Circuit. Our circuit is the fourth. I've argued a lot of cases in the Fourth Circuit. I argue cases Ninth Circuit quite often. That's California, Oregon, that area. So it depends on, we tend to say the worst area is Louisiana and some of the southern states are the most conservative and deny the most people in asylum. This circuit, this area is not great, but not bad. It depends on the judge. So they've gotten rid of some of my least favorite judges who were just, I thought, very conservative on the law. But you have to figure out too, is the story you're telling plausible? In other words, does it make sense? So I had a client, he said, oh, you know, I hid in a barrel, and it was already in his credible fear. I hid in a barrel in the house. So the judge says, well, did they search the house? Yes, they searched the house. Did they search everything in the house? Yes. How big was the house? How many yards was it? She went on. And then the client, in her decision, she said, how could they not possibly find you in the barrel? It was in the house. You said they searched the whole house. Doesn't make any sense. You know, so you have a situation there, and you have another situation where someone said, well, the Amber Boys took me and they put me in a cage in the jungle. Okay, where'd the cage come from? Why was there a cage in the jungle? There's no jaguars or tigers or, you know, well, why is the cage in the jungle? So, you know, you got to say things that make sense, you know.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. Time for us to take a break. As you can see, this is getting really, really exciting. You are watching this top-notch lawyer, Daniel Oswald Beach, one of the best in the United States. I know a lot of you must be asking the question, what is her number? Don't worry, I will hook you up. I will be announcing her number momentarily. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Voices of Africa. Time for us to have a short break, and I'll be right back.
Welcome to Garrett Delivery Service LLC. Have you been looking for a reliable and affordable moving company? Garrett Delivery Service moves your belongings using extra safety measures. We offer customized solutions to fit all of your delivery requirements, saving you time and money. We are dedicated to providing you with safe and prompt delivery services by partnering with a network of local drivers. Feel free to call us if you need assistance with booking your delivery. Here are some of the proficient services we offer: local moving services, furniture delivery services, medicines delivery services, letters delivery services, documents delivery services, grocery delivery services, food delivery services, flowers and gifts delivery services, junk removal services, home cleanout service. Other attributes to make you hire our fascinating services. Operational since 2019, 24/7 availability, timely delivery, trusted partnership with local movers. We value your time, maximum customer satisfaction, reasonable rates. Get in touch to book your delivery.
Very, very good. And you are watching Voices of Africa on Chat Night Africa. Daniel Beach will be up in just a moment on the platform to take more questions. Ladies and gentlemen, join me now in welcoming the vibrant lawyer, very experienced, covered 90 countries around the world in immigration courtrooms in the United States, Daniel Oswald Beach, once more on the platform. Daniel, before we had the break, you said some of the stories are downright ridiculous. So what's the role of the lawyer? I mean, don't people think that when they meet you, if I come to your office, I'm expecting you to reconstruct my story? Isn't that the job of the lawyer?
Okay, that's a good point. So lawyers have ethical rules, and the ethical rule says the lawyer cannot make up your story, cannot create basically what your story is. So, I mean, you have different lawyers, right? So many lawyers I see have created the problem in that the client, sometimes they're very uneducated, sometimes they're very educated. It doesn't seem to make a huge amount of difference, but sometimes they'll say, okay, here's my story, and then the lawyer will put the story down, and then they'll send that story to immigration. I am 100% against that. Most lawyers do that, and even people in my staff have occasionally done that when they ran. That I think is poor lawyering. Frankly, it means that they're not, looking at the story and does it make sense or not make sense. So if something doesn't make sense, I say to the client, this doesn't make sense. Can you explain to me exactly what happened here? Because sometimes you can kind of make, oh, okay, that does make sense, when you put it in context. But, a lot of times it doesn't make sense. So for example, today I had a client from Nigeria and he was explaining to me, he was in the hospital and he comes to the hospital, and these Amber boys arrive and they come and he sees them take these patients into the emergency room, and then he sees them being shot, and these 3 Amber boys are shot and then they're taken somewhere else. And then the nurse, and I'm like, you saw all this from the waiting room in the hospital, right? It's just, okay, wait a minute. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And, so then you have to go back and construct things. Another problem often is, like they said, okay, I walked all night. I walked from Bamenda to Boya. Okay, everybody knows you can't walk from Bamenda to Boya in one night, right? So come on, be realistic. How far is it from one place to another? Judges know how to use Google. They know how to figure out one place and another place.
But Daniel, wouldn't you expect that these things would have been all discussed in the chambers, in the lawyers' chambers, before the lawyer and their clients went to court? Well, how is it that the judge is only hearing these weird stories in court?
Because people come across the border illegally. And when people come across the border illegally, their first contact is not with a lawyer. Their first contact is with an ICE officer at the border. So at the border, they tell their story. And they obviously haven't thought about their story before they cross the border. So they tell this story, very specific, sometimes 18, 20 pages long. And their story is stuck. So the lawyer has to work with that story. The lawyer can't say, well, I'm going to throw that away and make another story. So clients do it to themselves for the large part by telling ridiculous stories at the border. Now, those who come in legally through a visitor's visa and see a lawyer usually don't have that problem if they have a good lawyer, because the lawyer hopefully, and I mean, cheap doesn't mean good. Expensive doesn't necessarily mean good. You have to go to someone who knows, has a high rate of success, who will fight for you. So some lawyers don't fight for you at all. They're like, you tell your story, whatever you say, that's what we're going to say. That's, to me, is not advocacy. It's certainly not court advocacy. It's not what an advocate is supposed to do. An advocate is supposed to fight for you, is supposed to represent your best interests and guide you on how to answer questions and how to respond. Because a lot of times it's just, a misunderstanding. It's maybe the judges, remember, these judges never go to some of these countries. Angola. If it's a judge been to Cameroon, probably never, never, never. So they don't understand how things work in your country. And when you explain it a certain way that to me might make sense, because I've been to Cameroon and I've seen things and I thought, whoa, that didn't make sense to me before, but it does now. For example, you walk into a city hall and there's stacks of paper all over the floor, stacks of paper on the desks. It's not computerized. And there are little kids who are sorting the piles and they lose things. Well, to a judge, that doesn't, that's not the way U.S. works. So they don't understand, that the country, the letterhead isn't correct, or, a misspelling in the letterhead, or misspelling in the name, or, so they judge a lot of things by our standards, not by the country and how the country does things.
Danielle, you say something very significant, that people who cross illegally, the first point of contact is with an ICE, that's immigration officer, if that's what it means, immigration officer.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Correct. What laws cover the illegal immigrant who has now crossed into the United States? Here's why I ask you the question. If I get pulled over by police while driving, I can plead, is it the fifth? I can
say plead. You get caught drunk driving and you say,
right, drunk driving. I can tell.
I'm not going to walk that line. I'm not drunk. I took cough syrup. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put one leg over the other or hold one hand over the other. I'm not going to do any of those things.
Okay,
Well, you're probably going to get thrown in jail for
okay, I can tell
obstruction.
the police officer who pulls me over that I'm going to talk to my lawyer and decide to say nothing. Is that covered by law?
All right. So
All right. So
completely
does
different
that same law
standards.
cover somebody who crosses the border into the
No.
United States illegally?
No. So someone who crosses before they enter the U.S. and who is in ICE custody does not, like on a credible fear interview, very, very few people have a lawyer. And I've been on interviews where I was the lawyer in a credible fear. Usually it's because ICE forgot to do or didn't or release the person too quickly, or they were pregnant or whatever. And so they didn't get an interview. And so they have to go to immigration to do the interview. But if they are doing the interview at ICE on the border, you don't have the right to an attorney. Now, it's be very rare that a person coming across the border says, I want to have my attorney present my credible fear. And yes, if you ask that in advance, they could accommodate, they probably would, but it's very, very rare to see that.
Keep watching Chat Night Africa.
And my guest is this leading lawyer in Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, Daniel Oswald Beach.
Let me correct you. It's actually Danielle Beach.
Yes, correct the name again, please.
Yeah, it's actually Danielle Beach Oswald, because Beach is my maiden name. Oswald was my married name, and my partner.
Thank you for thank you.
But
Thank you for the correction.
Also, I have to give a disclaimer or caveat. I haven't actually done 90 asylum countries. I've done 90 countries, but some of them have been for, other things like employment law areas or, family petitions or other things. So they haven't all been asylum.
Thank you so much for that clarification. A classic case reason why many people flee their home countries is political persecution. How does the immigration law define this?
So political persecution means that you must have either an imputed political opinion, which is a weaker case, or a political opinion. If you have a political opinion, usually it means that, number one, you belong to a political group or movement or party that opposes the current regime. If it's now that's not true for every country. Obviously, it could be a political opinion. Usually it's going to be a political opinion that opposes the ruling party. An imputed political opinion is much more difficult to prove, and judges aren't buying it very well. And I see a lot of people coming over the border. I'd say 80% are saying it's imputed. They're saying, no, I'm not active with SCNC. No, I'm not active politically. No, but my uncle got killed by the Amber Boys and they think I'm an Amber Boy. Or, they came to my village. They were going to burn down my village, and I hate this one. They made me give them food and cook for them and give them money. If you say that, you've kind of nailed your coffin, all right? So, so
I have to say, Daniel, probably I'm going to have to come and listen to some of these cases. The facts sometimes are exhilarating. Now, just so that people who are not from Cameroon, they understand this, Amber Boys are the people who took up arms against the government of incumbent President Biya. So if you hear Amber Boy, they are the separatists. Some people call them independents. Why?
But we could call them Boko Haram. That would be the same thing. Or
that leads me.
We could, in Ivory Coast, you could call them FPI at some point, and they were saying all FPI are all terrorists because Houphouët-Boigny was indicted and went to the ICC, International Criminal Court, because of war crimes. So, it depends on the country. Again, it depends on, so it's called a country that's viewed, and these are defined by the State Department. What countries are viewed at, and there's different levels. So there's a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So typically most countries tend to be tier 3 unless it's ISIS or, some kind of well-known
Danielle, I'm
terrorist,
going to ask you this question.
Hezbollah or something like that.
Good. I'm going to ask you this question. There's this guy who used to be called a general. I mean, one of those separatist groups. They call general, these generals strange names, but that's not the issue. The guy found himself in London. Let's say he traveled to the United States. Would the United States Immigration Court see him as an independent fighter or as a terrorist?
So that's a very good question. And I've done people who were high leaders like CIA for Ivory Coast. I've done policemen. I've done, people who are ministers for the department, a ministry in different countries. The problem with that is it's much harder because the courts say, wait a minute, you worked for the government. You're claiming the government's a persecutor, but you worked for them. Why didn't they fire you when you got arrested? Why are you were you able to still work there? And how is it that you were able to still work there? And so that's a kind of a problem in itself.
Not taken. Talk to me a little bit. How does somebody therefore get to prove credibly their qualification for asylum? How do you prove it?
To me, it seems very simple. Apparently it's not. But, so you prove credibility by being consistent, number one. Number two, by corroborating everything you say. So say you said, well, I knew Amini Bielou, he would come to my house, or I knew, some other country's leader, Angola, or whatever group, or I was a member of, I was a pastor of a church in some country where religions are persecuted, maybe Catholics, or churches have been burned down. I mean, that a lot of Soviet countries, that used to be the case. And when you say that, the problem is you have to prove it. So number one, you have to prove that you really were a member of that group, and or that this person. So the best way to prove that is to get an affidavit from that person, number one, or to get some kind of proof that you actually belong to that group. And if you don't, and you say, well, the judges look at it as convenient. How convenient that you came here and you never expressed any political opinion, but that, your uncle was killed, or this person was killed, and you didn't do anything yourself to show that you had any political opinion. Or so certain types of claims, political opinion is a hard one because you have to corroborate, number one, that you're part of that group that opposes the government. Number two, what did you do? So you say, for example, this is a very common problem. I was in court the other day for hours because my client wasn't very knowledgeable, unfortunately, about her political group. And so the government would try to trick her and ask her questions going round and round and, wording the same question different ways. And, what does the group believe in? What exactly did you do with the group? And if you're saying, no, I wasn't a member of any group, I'm not political. And that's the biggest mistake people make. They say at the asylum, at the ICE, crossing the border, no, I'm not political. I don't know why you came here if you said that, because, if your claim is based on politics and you're not political, why the hell are you asking for asylum? That's kind of the viewpoint of the courts. They're saying, it's convenient that this happened to you, but, maybe it goes away and you can go back, basically. So you have to be consistent. You have to corroborate. And what I do is I go with a fine-tooth comb over every single sentence that a person says and ask them, if this is going to be your story, are you going to be able to prove this? Are you going to be able to have a document to prove this? Because if it's not, then this shouldn't be your story. Maybe some things you can't prove because you can't get, because it's a war condition or this or that. But you should be able to prove most of the elements in your story. Another thing, people tell me, oh, I didn't put my brothers or sisters or my children on my application. My question is, why? I didn't think it was important. They're already legal here. I'm saying, well, that's even more important then. If they're legal here, why didn't you put them? Because you just lied to the court. Now we have to fix that. So a lot of what I do is I feel like I'm a fixer, fix this, fix that. I could be a plumber or a mechanic, it's like, no, that doesn't work. Let's fix it. So,
I'm going to have to ask you this, Danielle. The perception is that lawyers, a lot of lawyers, you lawyers don't turn down cases. You take the cases because of the money. Are there situations that Daniel Beach will look at a case file and say, this is not good?
Oh yeah, all the time. I look at cases, people want to appeal, they bring me their case, and I'm like, you have no chance of success. You messed up so many times. You didn't know your story. You didn't prove anything. And they're like, well, I got this lawyer, he was cheap, and, he's whatever, and, he didn't tell me I had to produce this. He didn't tell me this. He didn't give me a proper list. He didn't review my documents. He didn't prepare me, or she didn't prepare me. And I hear this all the time, and I get very frustrated because I feel like, why is that person a lawyer? Again, going right back to your point, Divine, why is that person a lawyer? Are they a lawyer for the money? I mean, I think you want a lawyer who's independently doesn't concerned with the money. Of course, every lawyer has to make money to run an office. That's a given, right? But you want a lawyer who's concerned about your welfare and helping you to succeed, not just about the money. And there's many cases I'll say to them, okay, so for example, a person lived in, I have a case like this, lived in 27 years in another country, had kids there. Husband was from that country, Nigeria. And you look at that case and you think, what the heck? Because that's called firm resettlement. So if you lived in another country, or you even went to school in another country before coming to the United States, so say you went to Chile, or you went to, Nigeria, and you lived there for 6 months. And that was after you left Cameroon, after you left Nigeria, or after you left Angola, or after you left Benin, or DRC, or Central African Republic, or Congo Brazzaville, or whatever. These are the countries I see the most, obviously, for Cameroon, besides Cameroon, for asylum. The question is, how long did you stay there? And what were you doing there? And why can't you go back? And then I see people who apply for passports. This is another issue, which you think is kind of obvious, but people all the time ask me, can I apply for a passport for my country? Well, the answer is probably not. If you're asking for asylum, you're asking for a passport from the very country you're saying is persecuting you. So why would you need a passport to go back to that country?
That leaves me wondering whether any lawyer advised them.
We love Chat Night Africa.
And my guest today is Daniel Beach. Danielle, before we transition to the second part of this broadcast, is there any question about asylum, seeking asylum in the United States that you would like to address?
So asylum is a very complex area. And I think many immigration lawyers don't fully understand it. Many beginning lawyers kind of understand it, but they don't really understand it. So, there's lots of little innuendos, pieces. There's the law. And if you understand what the law is trying to do and the purpose of the law, you also have to understand changes. You have to understand case law. You have to understand updated cases that come out, every month. You have to understand that particular judge and what their preferences are. So there's many, many things. Sometimes my clients, I feel like I'm being a teacher with them. I'm saying, you got to understand this. You got to understand this. You got to understand this, because you can prepare your client, But if you have a script and you prepare your client, and your client doesn't know what the government's going to ask, they're still going to fail because they're not going to understand, why is the government asking me about my visa? I don't remember when I applied for a visa. Oh, well, the government has a copy of your visa. That's why. So I would say that's one important thing is if you came in on a visa, make sure your lawyer does their proper due diligence. Another thing I would say that's very, very important, especially for many of my clients, is not all clients are created equal. I'm sorry, but they're not.
What do you mean by that?
By that, I mean some clients are able to think on their feet and answer questions. Some clients just can't remember anything. They can't remember dates. They can't talk their way out of something.
Are they frightened by the courtroom?
No, yeah, well, everybody's frightened by the courtroom, but I think some client, I actually love a courtroom. It doesn't scare me at all. But, I think a lot of clients are not only intimidated, but when a government attorney is firing quick, yes. So you did that knowing this, yes. And the clients respond, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, no. You can't be just saying yes,
Well, so hold it there. When I introduced you, I said, those who have seen you in action in courtroom describe you as the Pope or the colleges. Here is what somebody says. Danielle is much of a legend around the Washington, D.C. metro area, as she has devoted her career to searching for the most challenging immigration cases to be resolved and asylum granted to be gotten.
Let me just say that I know Jude very well, and Jude is an excellent witness. I've used him many times as an expert because he actually really does understand asylum as far as, what I'm trying to prove. He also really understands and cares about helping the client win. So I think, he's some Cameroonians, I wonder, are you really from Cameroon? Or another country, maybe Nigeria, because you don't understand anything about your country. You don't know basic facts about your country. How is it me, an American, knows so much more about your country than you do?
Strange things. Yeah. Well, now I'm going to open the phone line. If you want to call this this monument of a lawyer, you can call the number 240-603-7367. Let me repeat the number, 240-603-7367. You can call now and speak to this lawyer. Believe me, off this platform, this woman is not cheap. She's an expensive lawyer. And from her expertise, you can understand why. The question I'm going to ask you related to asylum seekers, before we transition to the next part of the program, we see people bussed from Republican-leaning states, e.g. Texas, for example, to Democratic-leaning states. Is it a matter of politics or is it a matter of the law? What does the law say? When people cross illegally into the United States, can they get into the country and live with whomever they want? Or why are we seeing, for example, the governor of Texas busing hundreds and hundreds of undocumented immigrants to New York, to Maryland, to Washington, D.C., and so on? Politics or law into play here?
I would say showmanship. So I think Governor Abbott in Texas is well known for making a political statement. I can't remember if he was the governor who sent all those people to Martha's Vineyard, but it was 50 people. 50 people is a token. It's nothing compared to the people crossing the border. It was an attempt to show, wait a minute, you do-gooders, you human right people, see how you like having these people in your backyard. So I think it's very political. it's
But then he makes the argument, like former President Donald Trump, that Texas is being invaded. Why is he or Donald Trump wrong? Why isn't that an invasion? If you're having 10,000 people coming a day, 20,000 people coming, why is that not an invasion?
okay, first of all, the people crossing the border is less than it's been. A lot of it because of COVID. It seems like it's going up a little bit now, but you're talking about caravans of people coming over. So these are people who are often from Nicaragua, Central American countries, El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico, seeking better opportunities, honestly, economically. They used to say they were afraid of the gangs or domestic violence or other things. I mean, some situations have changed. For example, a country starts getting tough on gangs like El Salvador. Well, now you don't really have a great claim necessarily for El Salvador for domestic violence, or, well, maybe domestic violence, but not so much against gangs. So I think that you're correct. These border states have a bigger problem than Maryland or Maine or Oregon, because people aren't crossing from Canada. They're crossing across the Mexican border. So yes, they have an interest in not having just people cross. So we used to have what was called third country bar, and I think maybe some people remember that, where people who came from Africa were stuck in Mexico for months, sometimes a year and a half. They weren't allowed to go stay with their relative. They weren't allowed to be paroled. They stayed in jail. They had the court hearing, and most of them lost because they had no access to a lawyer. There's no right to an attorney like there is in criminal court, where you get a defense counsel assigned to you. They had no way of getting documents. They had no way of, so most of them lost. So yes, these states have an interest in keeping people just flooding across their borders. But on the other hand,
the question, Danielle, is if the governor did not box them into blue states, that democratic states, would they, or could they, the illegal immigrants, drive themselves, or could somebody have driven them to anywhere, wherever in Maryland or in New York?
How? Yeah, I mean, you have a border, you have a fence, and yeah, people dig under it. You put a wall there, people will still dig under it. You have rivers, people maybe swim through them. You have a huge border. So the problem is, what is the solution? And Republicans say, maybe build a fence. But how are you going to build a fence across the water? How are you going to build a fence across the bay? How are you going to, people will find, if people want to come in, they're going to find a way, unless you have guards there shooting them when they try to come across, which America would hopefully never do. The few times that people have been shot, it's created huge trauma in the country and news. So, I mean, it depends what your viewpoint is. I agree with the viewpoint, frankly, personally, that people should try to come legally if they can. Now, obviously, asylum is an area where, people aren't coming here because they want to come here just to come here. They're coming here because either their situation is untenable in their home country, or because they have absolutely no economic opportunities at all and they want to come here. I mean, that's always been the reason migrants come here. And hopefully they can combine that with a political opinion or some ground that is connected, nexus to a ground that is qualified for asylum. Because if they're not connecting the pieces, and it's just like, I fled here because I was going to get shot. Okay, good luck. That's not asylum. So, I mean, as you can tell, I'm fairly tough attorney. I don't coddle my clients. If they're saying something that says that I think makes no sense, and I've been accused in my office to say, oh, you made somebody cry again. Okay, I didn't mean to make them cry, but I have to tell them the truth, because when they go to court, they win usually, and they say, oh, thank you for doing that. Thank you for preparing me well. Thank you for making me understand what I would need to go through and helping me to get through this pathway. So, I see my role as, guide.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's getting even sweeter today. We are about to hit the sweet spot on this program. Daniel Beach will be right back. Time for us to have a little interlude. Now, this broadcast is being aired concurrently on www.chatnightafrica.net. You can watch it there in high resolution. You can search it on YouTube also in high definition or resolution. It's two places on Facebook. Share, share, share. Lots of people need this information. I will be right back after this interlude. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Jarek Delivery. How to place an order. Download the Jarek customer app. Sign up with your name and phone number. Schedule an order and pay.
The nearest driver will pick it up and deliver.
With Jarek Compensation Plan, become a referrer and enroll a business with delivery needs and earn at least 5% commission on delivery cost. Become a business partner with Jarek and earn at least 10% commission on delivery cost. If you're a driver, you can earn 70% of the delivery cost. Great news! Our current promo is to refer a friend and get $10 on your next delivery when they use Jarek. These are the services we provide: food delivery, furniture delivery, grocery delivery, medicine delivery, moving, junk removal, flower and gifts delivery, auto spare parts and tires, party rentals, courier delivery. For more information, call us at 2407-018513 or visit our website www.jarek.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. At Jarek, we deliver with a smile. Download the Jarek customer app from either App Store or Play Store.
If you are watching this broadcast or discovering this platform, beautiful platform, for the first time, well, take note. We have 3 broadcasts on this platform. We have Healthline, we have Family Matters, and we have what you are watching now, Voices of Africa. Once again, let's welcome the Colossus of immigration law in the United States. Daniel, is it possible that somebody who has been granted asylum, their status gets revoked later on? If yes, under what circumstances?
Certainly it is. I have several cases like that right now. So it's often typically people who have been here 10, sometimes 20 years. It's very painful, honestly, because they got asylum and then either they didn't get the green card and they waited for years and they applied, or they applied for naturalization. That's more common. And I'm a big expert on naturalization because I do a lot of naturalization. It's actually, again, very complicated area, though people think it's easy. It's not. And what happens is it can be for various and sundry reasons. Usually it's connected to a fact that as people don't understand that immigration is like a puzzle. Every piece has to fit. So when you were granted asylum and you said certain things, and now you applied for your green card, and then you applied for citizenship, and you omitted or you added facts or you change things, then that can be a serious problem. Sometimes it's because you went back home. And if you're an asylum applicant, you're not supposed to go back home to your home country until you become a US citizen. And people, because some African countries are not so technological, though I'm sometimes technologically challenged, as Divine can tell you. But sometimes it's because people don't understand how that works. So I had a naturalization case, and the officer said, "Have you gone back to Nigeria?" Client said, "No." I said again, you sure you haven't gone back to Nigeria? And I was like, oh, okay. And she said, no, absolutely not. So then after a break, I take her out and she goes, well, actually, yes, I went back, but just to see my mother for, a month. And, but I didn't get any stamp in my passport, so they can't see that. I'm like, there are a million ways that they can find out. And that is not the only way. So, sometimes you're better off telling the truth and just there's ways to get around it than to lie. Because if you lie to an officer, that's bad. On the other hand, you don't have to tell the officer absolutely everything in your life. So it's a kind of a fine line, and it's a question of knowing what to say and what not to say. So revocation is a reality. Revocation, people lose, and it's very sad because people who have, what happens when you get revoked asylum? You have a hearing at the asylum office. They claim, usually it's because of fraud. They say, you said your father was dead and he was killed in your asylum story, and now you brought your father over. I mean, that's a typical stupid one, right? Okay, but it happened.
The father resurrected like Jesus.
Right. Or
just after many years, though.
Or something else. It could be many different things. And it's usually some kind of fraud that you committed. And then the problem is when you're revoked, what does that mean? It means you get put in deportation again, and you have to go in front of a judge again. And you have to get asylum again. But what if your country's Ghana? And they don't have asylum anymore because it's a democratic country and you got asylum 20 years ago. How are you going to get asylum now? That's a problem.
Danielle, the follow-up question is, if you had asylum, then later on had a green card and later on became a citizen, can you go back to that country you claimed persecuted you, which was the reason for you seeking asylum?
Yes, you can. As a U.S. citizen, you can. And why? The reason is because you have the protection of being a U.S. citizen. A permanent resident is not a protection. Nobody in the U.S. is going to come out and help you because you're a permanent resident. If you're a U.S. citizen, you have certain rights. Therefore, even though you might also be a citizen of another country, you're still a U.S. citizen. And therefore, once you have U.S. citizenship, unless you committed fraud to get that citizenship, it's very difficult to take it away. So once you're a U.S. citizen, even though you went back, that's perfectly fine.
I have a question, two questions. The first one just has been sent to me by text. Danielle, there are people here who were agitators in Cameroon, and here they are still agitating, in other words, fueling the conflict in Cameroon. How does the immigration law treat that? Can they be sent back for fueling the war in Cameroon, promoting it in Cameroon? That's a text I just got. The person prefers to remain anonymous.
So the short answer is yes, but I'd have to have way more facts. So what I've seen in Cameroon specifically, and there's a group, and I can't remember their name, but there's a group, and they here were U.S. citizens, I think, or permanent residents, and they started sending money and goods and things, and then they to the separatists, right? To because they want to be separate, right? But that's armed conflict, that's terrorism. But not only did they do that, they then very intelligently posted it on social media, like Twitter, Facebook. Immigration checks social media. Yes, they do. All the time. They check it at the border. The other day I looked at a case for a visa, and I looked, oh my God, they checked Facebook, they checked Twitter, they checked, Instagram, they checked every social media of this person. So, they posted, oh, we sent these guns. Here's a box of guns we just sent, that they got there. You are probably, again, are nailing your coffin. So if you're associated, that's a bigger problem. I have clients who were somehow got an affidavit from one of those people. That's going to, one of the biggest concerns for asylum, for any judge, for any, especially ICE attorney, is to prevent anybody who might be a potential terrorist or using violence from being ever allowed to remain here or get legal status. And if they have legal status, to try to get them removed.
But
So it's very
terrorist is in the eyes of the beholder. Daniel, the question I have for you, pointed. Are these people separatist leaders in the United States? Does the court or the US law see them as terrorists or independence leaders, fighters?
Yeah, so the law, our law, unfortunately,
because I think that's the meat of the question that was sent to me.
Right, exactly. So our law on terrorism is very double forked, I would say. So our law basically says, okay, if you were a policeman and you stood on a line and you watched someone being beaten and you did nothing, you're part of a persecutor group because you assisted persecution. If you gave the Amber Boys a glass of water and you fed them, you're assisted persecutors. By assisting, if your father or mother sent money, you could be a persecutor. So our law is incredibly, I think, somewhat unfair to the situation because, maybe you're an activist and you really want change in your country. And the only way you're going to achieve change is, you think, by, using violence. Well, the law says you can't get asylum if you committed any acts of violence whatsoever. So you can't use any violence. So it's you're right. It's the eyes of the beholder. But unfortunately, the people you're asking the benefit for are the beholders, and the beholders has a very, very, very narrow interpretation of that.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to other matters. I have another letter. I told you I have two texts. The other one is, Mom is a citizen in the United States. Applied for a visa for the children overseas to come from Cameroon to come here. The children were over 21. It's now been over 10 years, and they're still waiting for a visa. What could be happening here?
Oh, a lot of things. So first of all, a lot of people we do a lot of concept processing. It's not considered part of our asylum section. It's a different section of our office, but so it could be a lot of reasons. So one, it could be, I can give you 20 reasons. One, it could be that that person had applied for a visa before and lied about on their visa. It could be that person being over 21 is no longer eligible because the parent was only a permanent resident and therefore they weren't covered by the Child Status Protection Act. That's a question you need to go see a lawyer about, because that is not a question I can answer on this. It's a complex question that requires looking at documents, looking at getting what we call a Freedom of Information Act, seeing exactly where the problem occurred, and then determining how do you fix it.
Because according to the text, the mother is a U.S. citizen, so they're wondering why it's taken 10 years and the children back home are not getting the visa yet. They're on a wait status.
If the children are over 21, they fall into a different category to start with. So if the mother applied for the children and they were already over 21, then they fall into and they're unmarried, they fall into first preference. If they're married, they fall into a different preference. First preference, I think, is like about 8 years wait at least. If you're in a category and you're married, so I have a lady, she emails me all the time. How come my other two children, you got my one kid who was here granted, how come you can't get my other kids granted? Well, because I keep telling you, the visa bulletin says that your kids are married, they want to bring over their spouse and their children, and you petitioned for them when they were over 21. So there is a huge, long quota, and you are subject to the quota. And the quota means you have to wait till that quota number is reached. And when there's no visa available, you can't come. So it could be because of that. But again, it could be just because of errors or mistakes made by the client who is trying to file this, or maybe they didn't, make it clear to the embassy. It could be a lot of different things. I have people who say, oh, I tried to bring over my spouse. It's been 5 years. I said, what? 5 years? How can it be 5 years? And I find out they didn't do it right. So it could be, there's so many things. As I said, I could list you 20 things that could be the reason why it didn't work. So
Point.
I would suggest that particular client see a lawyer who understands consular processing very well. We do a lot of it, and can go to the root of the problem, because you have to fix the problem at the root. You can't try to bandage it.
Point taken.
Thank you.
Danielle, one piece of information everybody is waiting for now. How can you be contacted?
Oh, okay. So I used to take calls. I don't take calls off my cell phone anymore, because I have probably, like, I don't know, on and off clients. Sometimes clients have are subject to quotas. So if I were to count all my clients, I probably have 3,000-4,000. So I now am contacted by email. I do respond to all my emails if I know you and you're my client. If you're not my client, you have to go through a process. And that process is you schedule an appointment through their office receptionist. They schedule it. You fill out a form. Then once you have an appointment scheduled, I talk to you. Frankly, I spend probably 8 to 9 hours at least on appointments.
But the question is, somebody wants to become a client of yours.
Right. So
how do they go about it? How do they contact you?
So some people have a shortcut, right? So people I've used as experts. So, or, maybe they're a friend of a friend, and they say, so-and-so told me, like a German lady the other day, she goes, I can't believe I got you. Everybody said I'd have to wait till July. And I said, yeah, but you contacted me through a former employee who I know very well. And that's why I called you right back. So if I called during my lunch or something. So it depends. If you have a contact, or for example, you're Jude's friend, you're probably going to get quick contact. But
usually, you reach me. If you're rich divine, I know how to contact Danielle.
Right. But I mean, usually I don't have the appointment, so it's not a question I don't want to talk to the person. So usually you have to use the right keywords. You have to say, I have an appeal due in 15 days or 30 days. Here's my decision, because you can't just say that and not prove it, right? So my reception looks and they go, oh yeah, she has an appeal. Can you talk to her? So I will call you at night, or I'll call you, early in the morning, and I could be at 7:30 or whatever. But if it's a deadline driven case, you're going to get an answer very quick. If you're just saying, I've been waiting for an asylum interview for 5 years and I need an appointment. Okay, your case is probably not that urgent. You're going to have to probably wait the time period to see me. I do have now, someone else who's helping me with consults. So that's helping a little bit, but the reality is I'm in court 2 days a week. I'm preparing for court. I can't be available just when you call. So I don't take calls anymore. I've even stopped answering my cell phone, because I'll have a client who'll call me at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night and say, oh, I wanted to ask you about my work permit. I'm like, is this an emergency? No, but I haven't gotten it yet. I'm like, you couldn't send an email to the, legal assistant for that? And, obviously I can't just miraculously get you your work permit, but I'll check on it tomorrow. And I do, but clients, what they consider an emergency is not what I consider an emergency. So we have different concepts of emergency. My emergency is you're being arrested, you have an immediate deadline, or you have to leave the country, or you got some criminal issue coming up or something like that. That's my emergency. So I judge it by my emergency.
And that is Danielle Beach, the very highly respected lawyer in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Somebody's asking for the number to the studio. I will get it to you, and we'll take 1 or 2 calls before we close the program. Time for us to have a little transition. It'll be for about 2 minutes, so that maybe Danielle Beach can drink a glass of water or a glass of orange juice. She's been talking a lot. I will be right back Stay tuned.
I've been having conversations with people in the background, and the kinds of things they say about what you do for the community, you cannot imagine how big that is.
This is Voices of Africa on Chat Night. My name is Divine Chamkong. Once again, let's welcome Lady Danielle Beach on the platform.
So I don't think I fully answered your question. So I think Divine is going to put up my address, which is one way to reach me. And we're on Farragut West, which is 888 17th Street, Northwest, Suite 310, Washington, D.C. The other thing is you can call our office number, which is 202-331-3074. If you look me up under Beach Oswald, you'll see lots of Google reviews. You'll see our webpage. It'll be under Beach Oswald Immigration Law Associates. You can call our office number. You can also email me personally. My office email. My office email is dbeach@beach-oswald.com. And I think Divine was going to put all this up so that you
I will put it up
so
immediately.
that you know how to reach me, because obviously,
absolutely,
I'm happy to talk to you, but again, every case is individual, and if I'm going to help you, you're going to have to actually see me. You can't just call me and ask for advice. You have to make a consult appointment, and then we talk. And usually it's about 45 minutes, 50 minutes, close to an hour. And we talk about what your particular situation is and how we can resolve it. And again, many cases I don't take if I see no chance of success. Look, I'm not going to be working forever. Other people in my office are. I don't take cases for the money, ever. I take cases that I think I can win and then expect them to pay. I refuse a lot of cases. So that's
you get what you
operate.
pay for. You get what you pay for. Danielle, another question came in. Oh, by the way, somebody's asking for the studio number 240-603-7367. 240-603-7367. We will close this broadcast in 15 minutes. So if you want to call, you better do that now. Danielle, question: does any immigration law allow for the hiring of professionals outside of the United States in areas where there are shortages? For example, nurses, teachers, and so on.
You'd have to work for an international organization. The answer is, so that's a bit complicated, but generally, no. Generally, all the kind of visas, EB1, EB2, national interest waivers, EB3s, PERMs, Ls, Es, Os, all those kind of visas. And I have one attorney who specializes in those, who's very, very good. Those kind of visas, you have to be working here in the United States, or you self-sponsor if you're extraordinary. But your definition of extraordinary may not meet the immigration definition, so you need to check with us and send us your CV to determine. And obviously, for any employment case, the big caveat is you have to be in status. You cannot be illegally here or out of status. And that means asylum is not technically a status, so you have to have some other kind of status, such as a student visa or something else. So I don't see a way, Divine, to put my phone number on here on the chat.
Don't worry. I'll
All
put it. I will encourage people immediately the program is over. You can go back. You will see it in the green room. I will post it on your email. So guys, don't worry. Immediately the program is over. Give us 5 minutes. You can go into the green room. You will find the email address and the phone number there. Another question that just came in, Danielle, somebody walks in, crosses the borders of the United States as an illegal immigrant and is fortunate to get married to a U.S. citizen. Is that possible?
So yes, there's no law, like some countries, you're not allowed to marry a U.S. citizen. You're not allowed to actually get a marriage certificate in some countries. I think UK used to be one of them. If you're not in legal status, the U.S. has no such law. So you can marry anytime you want, U.S. citizen. I have plenty of clients who've been deported. They married a U.S. citizen. They had U.S. citizen kids. And now 10 or 20 years later, they come to see me because I'm one of the few people who specializes in this area, and say, how can I reopen my case? I was already deported, and sometimes they don't really understand that because they didn't actually leave. Or I bring people back, so there are ways to do that, but it's very difficult. So the better way, your answer is if you came across illegally, again, that goes back to my first point, you're inadmissible because you did not enter legally. Therefore, you're not eligible to adjust based on a marriage to a U.S. citizen. You can get an approved petition based on your relationship to that U.S. citizen. So you get an approved petition, but that does not give you a green card. So the law says you have to be paroled. And so here's where a lot of Africans get confused on that. They say, okay, I was paroled. ICE paroled me in. That's not the kind of parole. It's a different parole. It's a legal parole. So if you had TPS and you were paroled, yes, that would qualify. By the way, the embassy is doing something interesting in Cameroon, and one of the things they're doing, and I found out about this through a client, is apparently they're asking people to fill out what's called a FOIA form and sign it, which would give them access to your entire record and everybody who wrote anything for you, which is very dangerous. So never, ever, ever do that. Because they were asking for that in order to give you a passport. So it's very difficult in Cameroon. For some reason, the Cameroonian government has been very difficult about giving passports to anybody who applied for asylum. And they always know if you don't have another status, they know you applied for asylum, right? Because it's your job to prove you didn't. But you can't prove you didn't. So that's been the problem with. So there, it depends very much on what kind of paperwork you have when you came in. Typically, though, someone who entered illegally is probably not going to be able to get a green card in the United States unless they go out and come back in legally.
The last question, and then I'll ask you a last word. How do you improve, and this one just came in by text, how do you improve your chances of getting a visa into the United States?
Well, that's a whole topic. I could talk about that for an hour.
Sorry, we don't have an hour, unfortunately.
So,
but, say what you can, yeah.
I give a lot of advice about that to people who, when they ask for a consult. Basically, the law says if you're asking for a visitor's visa specifically, let's just deal with that one. You have to prove that you have the intent to return. So say your mother lives here, your brother lives here, your spouse lives here, and you're applying for a visitor's visa. Probably they're not going to give you one because they're going to say, you're not coming back to Cameroon. You're just going there to get a green card. So you have to show that you have the intent to return. Now, there's many parts and pieces that attach to that, but this is probably, as I said, that's a very long topic in itself to discuss. But yeah, there's all kinds of topics I could talk about that are related to immigration.
We'll invite you back. I know it's very tough. We've been arranging this interview the past how many months. It's tough to get Danielle here. And that's not because she doesn't want to come. She is very, very busy. Danielle, I'm going to ask for your last word before we close. What's your last word?
I would say the one thing we haven't talked about And that's that. It goes back to my statement that not all clients are equal. In other words, some clients have huge post-traumatic stress disorder and they can't remember things. They can't remember dates, or they maybe only have like a first grade education, or maybe they're so traumatized by something that they just can't remember things. Or maybe they have the oncoming of some kind of, cognitive issues. So we have a special procedure we use for those clients to get them asylum. So I think that that's important. It's a process that can be done, and usually there are safeguards established. And if we're able to prove that that is a genuine thing, those people would be able to get asylum probably easier than a regular person. But again, it depends on an assessment of their mental cognitive abilities. Whereas before, those people would never have gotten anything.
Daniel Beach. Danielle, thank you for coming on Chat Night to spend 1 hour, 30 minutes with us. I truly appreciate you. You've demonstrated extraordinary depth of knowledge. No wonder the moment I mentioned you in different social media handles that you were coming, oh my God, my people said that lady is something else. They score you very, very, very highly, and that has to do with your performance in court. The evidence has been shown here. I would say Exhibit A, as you would say in court. Thank you again. Did you have something to say before we go?
No, I just want to say, when you come to see a lawyer, bring what you've got. I mean, if you have paperwork, bring it. Don't bring your work permit application. Bring all your paperwork that you got at the border. Bring your passport. Bring your birth certificate. Bring documents so that the lawyer can properly evaluate your case. At least for me, because I like people. I like to review stuff. I like to educate my client. So that's my, I was a teacher and then I was a professor. So that's kind of my technique, and maybe other lawyers have a different way. But don't come to the lawyer and just have no information, because sometimes I'll ask people and they don't know even how to fill out the form. They didn't bring any. Oh, I have that at home. Bring what you got. Show the lawyer, because this is your chance for the lawyer to really evaluate what you got. Okay? And thank you, Divine, for having me today. I appreciate it. And I hope that some of you will, benefit from what I've said. And if it's triggered something that you have a personal situation or a case that you feel like you want me to look at, I'll be happy to talk to you. And we have an excellent staff, by the way. We have very great paralegals. We have really good attorneys. We're a small firm, but what we do, I think we're known for taking the hardest cases that most people would not be able to do. But we like easy cases too.
Okay, Danielle, you are used to meeting Africans. You are used to meeting Africans. As we take your seat in the green room, I have a short African beat for you for just 1 minute. Please enjoy this.
Just nice Africa. 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 Top night Africa.
And on that note, High Life Beat, perhaps Daniel Beach knows about it, High Life. You've been working with Nigerian clients, Ghanaian clients. Yeah, that's right. So I'm sure that you know about that. Yeah, beautiful. So, and this show is on our broadcast website, where I've just been told by my website manager, Mr. Roger Fall in Nigeria, who has been up now late in Nigeria to make sure that these things are aired concurrently on our different social media handles. He says we have a ton of people watching online. Thank you guys watching on the internet, www.chatnightafrica.net. If you have not discovered this stunning, beautiful website, you ought to go check it out. You will love every rubric on it. If you like our platform and you want to do anything social media, put visuals or the visuals, contact me. It's been designed by one wizard of this business, Dr. Elo. Dr. Elo, thank you so much. My director of transmission, Mr. Mumba Lingwa, and of course, all of you out there, I love you, appreciate you. That's why we go for great content and look for great speakers, monuments, to come and share knowledge here. If you're on YouTube, please hit the subscription button and the notification bell. Once we come out, we've lined up powerful content for you coming up in future. Once we are on, you will know, you'll be notified. Thank you. Merci à tout le monde. Je vous aime, mais il faut que je parte. I love you. I love you. Good things, all good things. Mais oui, je le fais. Thank you. Bye.
I'm coming back. I'm coming to get down. I'm coming to dance, We're gonna dance, we're gonna get down, we're gonna party hard. We're gonna boogie woogie, and when we jam, it's out of sight. This song right here, it's dynamite. I'm ready.